kind of wade in with some questions for Gabe as well.
Great. Well, it's my pleasure and privilege. Gabe, going back as far as I know, has a background in construction as a construction company owner. Families in the construction business. Gabe got in the insurance business, I think, about 3 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. Gabe can correct that if that's wrong. But 3 years ago or so, started out initially, elsewhere, and then came over to the Levitt Group. It's been my pleasure to work with Gabe, and what I would say is this: he exemplifies everything that I feel a producer should be. Number one, he has a lot of activity, quality activity. Number two, he's learned to manage his time, to make calls as mentioned, but not waste his time on fruitless efforts where people won't cooperate, give him the information, or just partner up with him to be a serious prospect. Gabe is constantly upping his game. His performance has been just terrific. He listens to people who might help him even get better than he is. He's a humble guy. People love him. He's got a personality as big as the outdoors, former athlete, very personable. But aside from the personality, he puts the sweat equity in. And to me, for the time he's been in the business, if I could Photoshop or copy what I would recommend to producers, how they progress, what they do, how they change, how they get better, the picture of Gabe Rodriquez comes up. So it's my pleasure to have worked with him, and I think we'll all very much enjoy what he has to say, and he's doing a wonderful job.
Well, I'll add this too. It's those who have been a part of the quest for some time. You always see Gabe. He's always right there near the top, and he's won the $100 pretty much every month. So I'm hoping his retirement fund is in a good position with that $100. It's been snowballing for a while there, Gabe. So talk to us, Gabe, if you wouldn't mind. Give us some background. I know you started with a peer competitor or a peer group, whatever you want to call them, Brown & Brown, I think it was. Talk to us about how you got into insurance. It's always, a story in and of itself, it seems, how one winds up in this industry. Kind of take us back a little bit. Talk to us about how you got into this gig.
Yeah, definitely. First off, I'd like to thank you and Greg for the introduction. Greg, that was much appreciated, man. I certainly appreciate, constant words of encouragement from Greg and Dan and Mike. So thank you guys. The way that I had gotten started in insurance is kind of a funny way. Basically, I've been, as you stated, in the construction industry for almost ever. Up to that point in my life, I had worked for the family business pretty much as a child. It's just kind of the way it is. And then, worked all through high school, weekends, summers, things like that. Same thing through college. And then I had worked for the family business for probably 10, 15 years or so after college. Kind of got the family businesses are tough. It was tough with family, and then just being in construction, concrete work in particular is very, very hard work. I got tired of going to meetings at my kid's school, filthy, dirty, smelly, things like that. And was just kind of over it, so ventured out, started my own concrete company. Thought, I'd enjoy that a little bit more, but long story short, there was just no passion there. No passion, no love, no excitement, just nothing to look forward day in and day out. So definitely was not happy. kind of got into some investing, real estate investing, things of that nature, and that was fun. So basically, the way I ended up is I have one of my best friends, his father is a regional VP for Secura. And I was talking to him at a little function one day and just, kind of mentioned, hey, I'm thinking about either getting into real estate full-time or insurance full-time. And he had said basically with my personality and the way I kind of interact with people, things like that, that he felt it would be a good fit. So here I am today. He connected me with, like you said, Brown & Brown, and that was a bit of a different experience. Lasted there for right around a year and then made the move to CIA Levitt with Mr. Bowers, who really, honestly, is the best manager a guy could ask for. And he's always wanting to know what he can do to help make us better, things like that. The resources and just the things that Dan offers is really makes the job that much better.
Dan's, not to make Dan blush, but you're exactly right. He's a terrific guy, terrific partner, and is very focused on the new producer and the onboarding process, and he's just a consummate professional in so many ways. Gabe, it's interesting because we see it, at the top of the activity chart nearly every month, and I know that takes discipline. I know that takes a lot of effort. Talk to us about we've heard it a million times, but you'll hear it a million more money time. That time when you're actually on the phone, making calls or out and about, making connections. When do you do that? When do you make money time your priority? Do you have a specific time in the day or a specific day in the week? Talk to us about how you generate the activity that you do and the consistency in which you do it, because it's obvious it works.
Yeah, definitely. So what I do is typically Wednesdays and Fridays are the days that I like to use to make my cold calls. And what I'll do is I'll block out from like 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. and then again from 1 to 3 on those 2 days at a minimum. Those are strictly cold call days. And what I try to do is turn off the Outlook because it's very easy to get distracted. It doesn't take much to get distracted from making cold calls. I mean, I don't. There might be people who absolutely love it, but I can't say that I'm one of those guys. I mean, it takes an effort for me to just continue on with my cold calls, but it does make a difference. And then what I do is Tuesdays, Thursdays, I like to go out and knock on doors and, my good cold calls that I have, decision makers, ex-states, things like that, to go bang on the doors Tuesdays, Thursdays, and just spend some time getting in front of decision makers, business owners, things of that nature. So I just try and, manage my time as best I can. And basically for me, it's all about being in front of the decision maker. I feel that I get cold calls basically to get information. If I can get an appointment off of a cold call, obviously I'll certainly do so. But I basically use the cold call to find out who the decision maker is, get the renewal date, get as much information as I can, just so I can have a more successful walk-in when I'm banging on doors.
That's a good suggestion. So you come into the scenario, the situation, somewhat prepared, so you can make the most of that interaction, basically.
Exactly.
Talk to us a little bit about, you've been in the business now, Gabe, for a while. A lot of times, producers, they sort of begin as generalists, and then they sort of find their way into a niche. Talk to us about areas of the business, niches, if you will, that you're either discovering or have discovered that you think will sort of set you up for the next 2 or 3 years?
Definitely. With a background in construction, that was the easiest transition to go into writing contractors, writing their risk management programs and things of that nature. So that's where I found the most success, just because I have a lot of contacts, with land development, things of that nature. So that was the easiest, and that's where the majority of my book of business is at. So what I'm trying to do now is diversify a little bit more, just because when the economy has another downturn, I don't want to feel it as bad as if I'm only writing contractors. So I've been really trying to venture out to writing more manufacturers, rubber, tire, metal, wood, things of that nature. That's probably my second largest niche has been just in manufacturing. There's a ton of them, believe it or not, in Colorado. Not huge, but definitely good size mom and pop companies that are just looking for some help, looking for some assistance. So also food and beverage, there's a lot of good things happening there. So kind of starting to dabble into that market a little bit as well.
Yeah, I think that's a good point on the, construction is very cyclical, as you know. I mean, the highs are really high, the lows are pretty low. So I think it's smart that you're kind of looking at diversifying and looking for ways to insulate your book, if you want to call it that, from a real downturn. So I think that's wise. Greg Gates, talk to us a little bit. Heard Gabe talking about his money time. I know you've worked closely with Gabe. Give us some of your tips, thoughts on how you get away from the distractions that naturally come, and set aside that time for prospecting. You're one of those guys, Greg, that, I mean, you have that uncanny ability just to do what needs to be done, even though you don't really like it. In fact, I remember once, I know you used to run, maybe you still do. I remember asking you, hey, well, you must love to run. If you're running every single day in the morning, and you said, no, I don't, but I do it because I feel good and I know I need to do it. I'm sure cold calling, Greg, felt that way as you were in the business, building a book. Talk to us about just some advice, just some counsel on setting that time aside to prospect.
Sure. I talk to a lot of producers, and this seems to be a fairly common problem. I was talking to one producer today, and she was mentioning that she's had some good success. She's learned the business. She's a hard worker, and she says, the most difficult thing for me is creating enough activity to keep ahead of the game. And I think this certainly isn't a scientific explanation, but I learned I learned very early that I needed to support my family. I needed to make money. I needed to have significance in my job. I wanted to be successful. And I came to the conclusion very quickly that quality activity is important, certainly, but if you have an extensive amount of activity, you will learn through the process of just experiencing the highs and lows, what turns out to put money in your pocket and what doesn't. And I think what always drove me to make the calls is, number one, I made it a habit. Number two, as Gabe has done, I made it mandatory in terms of my scheduling to block out the time and didn't let anything else interfere with it. And number three, I had a tremendous fear of failure. And I think a lot of us, are concerned with that. But we have difficulty setting a schedule if we have enough activity and work hard at the business and learn the business and be all we can be, we won't fail in this business. So I think the key is, number one, you need to get into your mind that if I don't have sufficient activity, if I chase the rainbows, if I chase accounts that are just out of my stratum and out of my wheel well, I'm going to fail. And one quick thing about Gabe that I always was impressed with is that he had a period of time, brief period of time, because if it doesn't work for Gabe changes it and gets out of it. But he was kind of going through a period of time, as I remember, where he was calling on some big accounts, and kind of laid off the mid-size accounts that made him what he is. And I think he still calls on large accounts, but he does it intelligently in that he spreads it out. He doesn't. He's going to eat well whether he shoots the elephant or not. So I think Gabe learned that early, and I've been very, very impressed by his willingness to listen to people, and just he has an extreme desire to get better and constantly trying to achieve. I want to be better today than I was yesterday, and I want to be better tomorrow than I was today.
Let me touch upon something here and directing the question back to Gabe. Greg was talking about chasing rainbows, and I like that expression because we've all chased a few rainbows in our day. I know when I was a new producer, I chased a few. How have you improved over the years, Gabe, do you think, in identifying a rainbow that's not going to have a pot of gold and the rainbow that will? In other words, sometimes we can kind of go on these wild goose chases and really all the prospect was looking for was a quote to keep his existing broker honest. Obviously, that's the type of business we want to avoid. How have you been able to sniff those out in greater probability as you've matured in your career, and what advice do you give to everybody?
Yeah, I definitely, so what I've done is made it a point to ask the difficult questions, the questions that maybe most of us, especially new producers, number one, don't want to hear. We kind of think in the beginning that, we're very lucky for a business owner to let us come in and work on their account, provide them a quote, what have you. And honestly, there are a lot of business owners who are going to let you come in and quote, and like you had said, Mike, basically use our quote to keep their guy honest. So what I have tried to do, day in and day out is ask the difficult questions. Is this a real opportunity? Are you prepared to fire your broker? Yes.
In other words, just being forthright and asking them to be forthright and just kind of cutting to the chase relative to, whether this is a real opportunity. You found that to be a good approach to avoiding time wasting. Am I hearing you right?
Exactly. Yes, sir. That's correct.
Greg, give us your perspective as well. I'm going to ask you the same question. How have you, when you were out developing a book, how did you kind of sniff out the real opportunities from the ones that were just time wasters?
Well, I think following up on what Gabe says, I think that was good advice. I came to the realization, not particularly early because I'm not the quickest study, but I eventually came to the realization that activity and time management goes hand in hand. You need the activity, but you have to manage your time and not working on things that, as I said, are rainbows, or that you get down to the point where you think you're going to write it and you don't. You get discouraged and they just ended up, going back to their other broker. I think in the beginning, I was, hesitant to ask a prospect difficult questions because I was afraid that he or she would say, "Well, you ask too many questions," or, I don't want to quote and whatnot. So I had in my mind that I was after the quote. I want to quote. I want to do this. I have to quote. I changed my attitude to I want to quote if I have legitimate opportunity to write the business. And I started doing what Gabe does, which is, what do I have to do to be your broker? What are you looking for? What's the process going to be? And asking the difficult questions. And I started realizing that half my calls, when I asked a difficult question, disappeared. They told me, they were going to give my quote to the other broker, that they were happy. They really didn't want to change, but I was happy to quote. And I thought, well, if I eliminate that 50% by asking the tough questions, I'm probably going to have a considerably higher close ratio on the ones that are legitimate. And because I won't get busted so much, I won't get discouraged, and I won't feel, like, gee, it's either my problem, or, these buyers just don't know what they're doing. So time management activity in terms of importance is 50-50. And Gabe was one that learned that very, very early and in the game, and basically, ask the tough questions and eliminate the people that are just looking to keep us busy and not make us any money.
Yeah, great point. Gabe, talk to us about average account size as we've discussed a lot throughout the quest. When people get into the business, I remember this very thing happening to me. You just you're cutting your teeth on the teeny stuff. You're trying to basically write whatever is willing to give you a shot at it. And I understand that there's a little of that, which is natural and in some ways probably good, but you get to a point in your career where you realize the math of it all. In other words, really in order to build a book of business that's a size that is going to sustain you as a professional in a way that brings you satisfaction, that you're going to have to write certain accounts that are of a size that can help you build that book. When did you come to that sort of realization, and what type of an account would you say is, just your threshold? In other words, you say, I'm not going to really write anything under 1,000 in revenue, or give us, just your approach on how you deal with that reality and your vision for the type of accounts you want in your book as you move forward as a professional.
Sure. So what my focus is on, I try my best, to write accounts that will provide 5,000 in revenue and above. So typically, 5 to 10,000 is a pretty sweet spot for me. What I think, I definitely try to write accounts, larger than that if I can. I don't really want to focus on any accounts, that are less than, we'll say, 2,500 in revenue. Basically, my thought process is, I could take a $1,000 revenue account, or I could take a, $40,000 revenue account, and they're nearly the same amount of work, with regards to marketing, apping them up, things like that. I mean, obviously you have, some more vehicles and whatnot, but all in all, when it's said and done, they realistically take, nearly the same amount in the beginning. But in the long run, I've noticed that it's the smaller accounts that require more of my time, that are constantly calling me or emailing me. And that's fine. I love to provide, my opinion and thoughts and advice and things like that. That's my job. But I have noticed that when you work with larger accounts, they're much more savvy. They are worried about price somewhat, but they're more worried about proper coverages, brokerage services. What are we doing for them? Are we going to be there, if they have a loss or a claim? Things of that nature. So I felt that I wanted to surround myself with with clients such as that, a little bit more savvy maybe. I'm learning things from my clients day in and day out. I just realized pretty soon on that that's who I wanted to be surrounded by and use my time a little bit more efficiently in writing account sizes, 5 to 10,000 and above.
That's perfect, and I think that's great that you found that threshold strike zone. I know we have a partner, Fred Stafford, loves to call it the strike zone. That you feel like works well for you and your expertise, and works well for you economically as you build your book of business. The follow-up question I have, Gabe, to that is, how do you find these accounts? It's easy to find the rinky-dink taco stands down the street, if you will, that are willing to talk to anybody, but these more substantial, let's call it $5,000 to $10,000 in revenue type prospects. How do you wedge in? How do you establish relationships with these type of accounts? Is it trade shows? Is it Chamber of Commerce? Is it social media? Give us a little bit of insight into how you nurture that prospect base.
Sure. So I use a few different methods. I use LinkedIn. I've got quite a few contacts on LinkedIn, so I poke around LinkedIn a lot. I also use Reference USA, and then Mr. Reed Finch has got us set up for Sales Genie, which are all great tools. So basically I go in, I download my database, prospect list, things like that. But the way that I have been building the wedge lately and more recently is I hardly ever speak about price. My first appointment, I really never speak about price. Basically my focus is on broker services. What can we do for you? I always tell prospects, any broker in the world can provide you with a quote and try and save you dollars, but that's not our focus. At CIA Levitt, that's not what we're only looking to do. We want to provide expertise. We want to be here for you, things like that. I always do a policy audit, see what I could find, and I'm 100% honest. Sometimes I just don't find anything, or I don't find anything that's large enough to drive the wedge, and I express that to the prospect, and 9 times out of 10, they're even more receptive when I'm 100% honest and let them know that I don't find anything. So those are kind of some of the ways, the tools that I use to just build the wedge. But again, it's for me, it's broker services. It's trying to build a relationship. Whenever I walk into a prospect, I try and find a way to relate to them. I'll find a picture of them hunting or golfing or what have you. Break the ice by talking to them about that and kind of get them on my side to see past the insurance salesy person that I am deep down inside, and basically try and get them on my side, feel comfortable with me, and go from there.
Two points I'll make that just sort of extensions of what you just said. One, Reference USA. That's actually a pretty helpful web base I've found. And basically, if you don't know what it is, you can get a free subscription just by having a library card. And it basically is a database of pretty much every single business in the United States. And you can narrow down the search in a variety of different ways to identify the type of businesses that fit your criteria. So that right there I thought was a great point. That's a place you can go to identify the type of businesses you'd like to target. You can also narrow it by revenue size and a whole host of different qualifiers. The second point you made, I thought was really resonated when you talked about just getting familiar with prospects, making them feel comfortable with you. My father was an insurance producer early in his career, and I remember he had the account, Mrs. Fields Cookies. I don't know if you remember Mrs. Fields Cookies, but I was really proud that, he wrote Mrs. Fields Cookies when I was a boy. He'd always bring home a bag of cookies once in a while, and anyway, it was kind of a neat account. But anyway, one of the keys he used to tell me about in the business is, he'd always make sure he was working toward the customer feeling as comfortable with him as they felt with the incumbent. And once he was on equal footing relative to the relationship with the incumbent, he was in a position at that point to actually win the business. Because, and Greg, maybe you can make a few comments on this. I mean, the reality is we're all human, and it's difficult for somebody to break difficult news to another, especially if they're close with that person. So if they're equally close to you on the relationship side as they are at the incumbent, suddenly that provides you with a better likelihood of success. Greg, maybe you can comment on that.
That's a good point, Mike. What I did is, and I think that, there are some people that, stay with brokers that they shouldn't, and others that maybe leave a broker too quick, for empty promises. What I got to the point of doing is if I felt like I had increased coverage and have a competitive price, if I felt the client or the prospect at that point in time was the type of person that might have difficulty terminating the current broker. Now, if there had been problems and whatnot, sometimes I would ask the question I'm going to reiterate here, and they'd say, have problems with firing him or her. I can't wait to call them and tell them they're out of here. But what I did have is I had a number of people when I said, now you're going to have to notify your broker, that I'm your new broker, and I'm sure they won't be happy. And is that something that you feel comfortable doing? And are you okay with that? And I got a number of people that said, and it's hard to believe, but I'm really not, because they'll yell at me and they'll get upset, and I don't want to put up with that. And I just don't want to tell him no. There's several things you can do. You can say email him or her. That's one thing. The other thing is, even under certain circumstances, believe it or not, I call on behalf of the client and fire the broker. Which, if they want you to do that, it's only been a couple times in my career, but I've done it. But thirdly, most of the time I get the response that I just shared. I tell them to stay where they are. Basically, if they don't have the courage to terminate their broker, what's going to happen is they're going to share the price, or they don't have the guts to do it. And I've had terrific quotes in the past, and once I told people that, I've had them tell me, I just can't do it. I don't want to put up with the grief. And I just say, understand, if matters change or whatnot, please give me a call. Some of those clients will go to new companies and call me up and tell them to come over and write their insurance. Some of them, the agent got out of the business or retired, I got the business. And some of them, I never heard from again. But, I'm not going to go through the whole process and find out that the buyer, doesn't have the wherewithal to terminate the relationship with the broker. So I would ask, and interestingly enough, I got a number of people that told me, I just can't do it, I'm uncomfortable doing it, and they just stayed where they were.
Wow. Again, it's interesting how candor sometimes is the best approach, respectful candor, I think is a good way to put it. Gabe, talk to us a little bit about where do you see your career over the next 3 to 5 years in terms of book size? Do you see your average account size increasing. Maybe kind of take a look down in the crystal ball, if you will, over the next 3 to 5 years, and where do you want to be? Where do you see yourself relative to your book size, and what do you think you need to do as a professional to make sure you get there?
Yeah, over the next 3 to 5 years, I'm certainly pushing to have, at a minimum, $1 million book of business. I certainly have to increase my average account size, in which I'm trying to do now in baby steps. Greg had mentioned last year, I got a little, probably big for my britches. I wrote a couple $20,000, $30,000 accounts, what have you, and kind of started to expect that from myself. So I started focusing on $50, $100, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 revenue accounts, and as we all know, those take years typically to develop that relationship, things like that. So I'm still building a relationship with those kind of prospects, and that's going well. But I need to step up my base revenue amount in baby steps. Kind of focus on 10, 15, maybe $20,000 accounts this year, and move up a little bit next year, so on and so forth. So that's kind of my game plan. But yeah, I'm pushing to have $1 million book of business within the next, 3 to 5 years at a minimum.
That is great. I mean, that's an ambitious goal, Gabe. I mean, that really is. That's, I think about, the number of producers we have in our group that have $1 million books, and not that many. I mean, we have some, definitely, and that is more of a I'm impressed as a discouraging statement, because I know you can do it. And I know you can based on just the type of professional you are. But you think about the $1 million book. It doesn't take a mathematician to figure out what that means on an economic level. I mean, that's quite an impressive goal. And I, for one, believe you can get there personally. So no, I like the sound of that. Greg, if you had to advise Gabe, you heard the goal yourself, the $1 million book. If you had to provide any advice and counsel, you heard Gabe's thoughts on how to get there. Would you what are some other tips or advice that you would provide to Gabe and to everybody else listening on how you reach that magic number, a $1 million book? I mean, that's like Shangri-La. You get to be, if you have $1 million book, that's extremely impressive. Talk to us about how does Gabe and these other producers on the line get to that point?
I think that, I think that the most critical thing, actually there's a few steps. Number one, having a firm foundation with a strategy how to get there. How many calls I need to make a week, what size of accounts I'm going to call, how I'm going to position myself in terms of keeping my existing clients and using them for references for other opportunities. What I used to do many times is go to my more well-known firm clients, and I'd ask them for, do you know some folks around here that might be able to use my services? And 9 times out of 10, they were very, very pleased, and very pleased that I asked them because I respected them and I needed their help. And what I would do is I would concentrate my calling efforts around areas where I had several name accounts. And I could walk in and say, I was in the area, I'm the insurance broker for X. If the insured knows them, I would say they had mentioned to me that they really admire the way you run your business, and they had said you're the type of client that I'm seeking. So it's a combination of things, and I know this sounds unusual, but one of the biggest things to building $1 million book other than the, fundamentals that we've talked about, is really feeling in your own heart and in your own mind that you can achieve that goal. If we think of ourselves as a $300,000 book producer, we'll be a $300,000 book producer. Now, I'm not saying if we have $300,000 book producer talents, it's going to be very difficult to get to $1 million. But sometimes just having a goal like Gabe does that is reachable but a stretch encourages us to do more of the things that are successful and to eliminate the things that are chasing rainbows, spinning your wheels, etc. So part of this business definitely is a mindset. That's not dreaming about it. That's wanting a goal and seeking direction among others who have done that, and talk to other people that have $1 million books. How did they get there? What did they do? Take a little bit away from everybody you talk to.
I think that's a great point. I mean, I could reel off a bunch of producer names, but you're lucky, Gabe. You got an amazing producer and your manager there, right there. So sometimes you don't have to look past your own manager. Anyway, very insightful. Just the comments that you provided, Gabe, Greg, also just some terrific advice that I think we can all
Mike?
take away. Yeah, go ahead.
I wonder if I could ask Gabe one thing that I'm really interested
Absolutely.
in.
Yeah, you bet.
I've always, and it may just be, Gabe, the type of person you are, but working with a lot of producers, some of them just aren't naturally optimistic. They have difficulties taking disappointments and bouncing back, to get back in stride. Many of them, it's a lonely job. They feel out there alone, and sometimes they get down in the dumps and get a rejection, or they lose an order. I mean, there was a time last year where you were in a period of time where you were, or it was, I think, about July, August, September, around there, where you were a little bit behind, and then the floodgates erupted. And my question is, other than what appears to be a naturally optimistic person, what are the things you do to keep your attitude fresh, to keep your optimism high, and to keep your enthusiasm when you run into those roadblocks that we all get and you experience disappointment, which all humans do?
Yeah, great question, Greg. Well, I'll be honest with you. One of the things that kind of helps keep me going is, like you had said for you, I've got a wife and children that I have to provide for. And I think, I've told you, Dan, and others, my kids, they like to play sports. And these days, sports are very, very expensive. Life is very, very expensive. So for me, it doesn't take a whole lot, other than the fact of the matter is, I don't want to be broke. I don't want to. I mean, life is a struggle. I can't afford to sit around and feel sorry for myself and think, well, shoot, I should have had that account. I saved this prospect $10,000 and had better coverage, things like that. I can't worry about trying to control the uncontrollable for myself. All I can do is continue to push forward, try and control my own destiny as best as possible, and always remember that I have two little mouths to feed, and if Daddy doesn't bring home the bacon, the kids starve, and that's really all that it takes for me. And as you said, last year I went through the worst slump ever, which is what I thought, but, I continued to push forward and do what needed to be done, even though, I had a handful of months that were unsuccessful, and it seemed like the harder I pushed, the less success that I had. And I remember specifically, speaking with Dan and Greg, like, man, what do I do? I'm making hundreds of calls a week. I'm banging on every door possible, and I just can't, I can't get anything going. And I remember Greg specifically saying, you're probably, showing them your sense of desperation. Maybe you're pushing too hard. So kind of backed off and wrote a real nice account at the end of the year. But that's that's why I do what I do. I'm here to provide for my kids and my family, and that's what keeps me going day in and day out.
Thank you.
I think that was very well said, Gabe. I took it to heart. I mean, we're all here, trying to build a living and make the most of our career and to provide security for the ones that we love. And so that was very eloquently put. And let me just say thank you for the time that you've spent with us today and for the great work that you put in for CIA Levitt and the Levitt Group generally. Sincerely appreciate everything you do for this company. So thank you very much.
Amen.
Anytime. It's my pleasure.
Andrea, I'm going to give the time to you. Lead us out here with some Amazon gift cards, and let's see who the winners are today.
Okay. We had some great participation today, and I just want to tell you guys, it has been awesome watching the chat today. There were a ton of good questions that were asked, and part of the reason why I wanted to ask Gabe to talk today is, first, I went and looked at the list of top new producers for 2015, and Gabe was one of those producers. But as you guys all know from watching the scoreboard, he always is really high on that. And so I thought it was great for everybody to hear what he's doing. And I think you guys should use the opportunity of participating in the quest together to contact each other and ask questions like this, because you can really help each other out a lot. You guys are all fighting similar battles, and I think you can learn a lot. So I appreciate Gabe being here, and I appreciate everyone's questions. I asked 4 questions, and then the last one I just put everybody's name in the drawing that had asked a question of Gabe. So really quick, the questions were, what was the main reason Gabe decided to leave the construction industry? And it was because he didn't really feel passion and excitement for what he was doing anymore. There are a few other things there, but that's the main thing. What are some things that Gabe does to help make sure he gets his cold calling done? There were a few good things on this as well, but the main things I made note of were that he sets aside specific time and day for his cold calling and for his knocking doors, and he makes sure that he doesn't have distractions such as email going that can keep him from getting his work done on that. And then one of the things that Gabe and Greg on question number 3, what did they recommend that you do to eliminate prospects that aren't worth pursuing? And that the main thing on that was to ask the difficult questions. And then number 4, how does Gabe establish relationships with prospects? Again, on this one, there were some great answers, but just in a nutshell, he gathers information using Sales Genie and Reference USA, LinkedIn, doesn't focus on price, but focuses on broker services and tries to find a common interest. And our winners are Paul Lotta, and I apologize in advance if I say your names wrong. I'll make sure that I have them spelled right so you get your award. So Paul Lotta, Dave Deacon, James Cahill, Parker LeCates, and Jake Newman. So I'll be sending an email to Teresa Bondad, and she is really good about getting those Amazon gift cards sent out pretty quickly. So you guys should have those by next week.
Excellent, excellent. Here's a little round of applause for the winners. Round of applause for Gabe. Thank you so much for joining us today. I learned a ton today. I hope you did as well. Again, thank you for all of the hard work you put into your professions. Greg Gates, thank you. And again, thank you, Gabe Rodriquez. And,
thank you, Mike. Thank you, Gabe. Thank you, Andrea.
Thank
we
you.
will see you guys next time. Okay, see you later.
Bye.
Bye-bye.